On Christmas, my millionaire son and his wife locked me out of the house. The snow was freezing my body. I went back to my car. The next day, when they checked their bank accounts, it was already too late, and my phone didn't answer any of the 69 calls. But let me tell you how I got to that moment. Sitting in my freezing car at 11 p.m. on Christmas night, watching the warm glow from my son's windows while I shivered in the darkness. I had spent 3 weeks preparing for this Christmas dinner. 3 weeks choosing the perfect gifts, wrapping them in expensive paper, planning every detail to make it special for my grandchildren. At 68, I still believed that if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, loved enough, my family would finally see me as more than just a convenient source of money. The gifts in my trunk were worth more than most people's monthly salary. A new laptop for Emma, my 12-year-old granddaughter who dreamed of becoming a writer. A professional art set for little Jake, who spent hours drawing in his room.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
For David, my son, I had bought the vintage watch he'd been admiring in the jewelry store window for months. And for Sarah, my daughter-in-law, the designer purse she'd been dropping hints about since October. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being a good mother and grandmother. I had no idea I was feeding a monster that would eventually devour me whole. The evening started normally enough. I arrived at David's house at 6 p.m. sharp, my arms full of beautifully wrapped presents and a homemade apple pie that had been Harold's favorite. Harold, my late husband, who had been gone for 3 years now. He used to say that family was everything, that we should always take care of our own. I held on to those words like a lifeline, even when everything inside me screamed that something was wrong. "Mom's here with more guilt gifts," I heard Sarah whisper to David as I walked through the front door. The words hit me like a slap, but I pretended not to hear them. I'd gotten good at pretending not to hear a lot of things over the years. The children ran to greet me, their faces lighting up at the sight of the presents. At least they still seemed genuinely happy to see me. Emma hugged me tight, her small arms wrapping around my waist. "Grandma, did you bring us surprises?" Jake asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "Of course I did, sweetheart," I said, ruffling his hair. "But dinner first, then presents." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her smile tight and artificial. She was beautiful, I had to admit. At 35, she still had that effortless grace that made heads turn. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite having cooked all day. She wore the expensive jewelry I'd bought her for her birthday, though I doubted she remembered where it came from. "Margaret, you really shouldn't have brought so much," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The children are already spoiled enough." The comment stung because I knew what she really meant. I was spoiling them. I was the problem. I was the one who couldn't just show up empty-handed like a normal grandmother. David emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish rag. My son had his father's strong jaw and kind eyes, though those eyes seemed to avoid mine more often these days. At 42, he was successful in his own right, working as a regional manager for a tech company. But somehow, my financial help had become so routine that it no longer seemed like help at all. It had become expectation. "Hey, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "How was the drive?" "Fine, dear. The roads were clear." I handed him the pie. "I made Harold's favorite. I remember how much you used to love it when you were little." Something flickered across his face, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Thanks, Mom. That's really thoughtful." We gathered around the dining table, the same table I'd helped them buy when they moved into this house 5 years ago. The house itself was beautiful, a 4-bedroom colonial in the best neighborhood in town. I'd helped with the down payment, of course. Just like I'd helped with the new roof last year, and the kitchen renovation the year before that, and the landscaping that had transformed their yard into something worthy of a magazine cover. As we ate, I tried to engage the children in conversation, asking about school, their friends, their hobbies. But Sarah kept redirecting the conversation, making subtle comments about how I was overwhelming them with attention. "Emma, don't bother Grandma with all those stories about your writing. She's had a long day," Sarah would say. Or, "Jake, let Grandma eat in peace. She's not used to so much noise." Each comment was small, seemingly innocent, but together they built a wall between me and my grandchildren. I was being painted as the fragile old woman who couldn't handle normal family interaction. The sad part was, I played along. I nodded and smiled and made myself smaller, quieter, less of a burden. After dinner, we moved to the living room for gift opening. The children's faces lit up as they tore through the wrapping paper, their delighted squeals filling the room. For a moment, I felt that warm glow of purpose that I'd been chasing for so long. This was why I did it. This was why I gave and gave and gave. But then I noticed Sarah's expression as she watched the children with their expensive gifts. Her mouth was set in a thin line, her eyes cold and calculating. She caught David's eye and nodded toward the kitchen. "Kids, why don't you take your new things upstairs and get ready for bed?" she said sweetly. "Daddy and I need to talk to Grandma." My stomach clenched. I knew that tone. I'd learned to recognize it over the years, the way her voice became sugar-sweet when she was about to deliver poison. The children protested, but Sarah insisted, and soon it was just the three of us in the living room. The Christmas tree lights twinkled cheerfully, but the atmosphere had shifted. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and uncomfortable. "Margaret," Sarah began, settling into the chair across from me like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. "We need to talk about this pattern of yours." "Pattern?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "This need to buy everyone's affection," she continued. "It's becoming a problem. The children are starting to expect expensive gifts from you, and frankly, it's making David and me look bad." David shifted uncomfortably on the couch beside me. "Mom, what Sarah means is—" "I can speak for myself, David," Sarah interrupted. "Margaret, you need to understand that love isn't something you can purchase. When you show up here with hundreds of dollars worth of gifts, it sends the wrong message to the children." I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. I just wanted to make them happy. I wanted to give them a nice Christmas. At what cost? Sarah's voice was sharp now, the sweet facade dropping away. "You're teaching them that love equals money, that relationships are transactional. Is that really what you want?" The worst part was that she wasn't entirely wrong. I had been trying to buy their love, their attention, their time. But what choice did I have? Without my financial contributions, would they even want me around? "I thought I was being helpful," I said quietly. "Helpful?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Margaret, you've been enabling us for years, paying for things we should be handling ourselves, making us dependent on your generosity." The way she said the word made it sound dirty, shameful. David finally spoke up. "Mom, maybe Sarah has a point. Maybe we have been too dependent on your help." My heart cracked a little. Even David, my own son, was turning against me. "I never asked for anything in return," I whispered. "Didn't you?" Sarah stood up, pacing to the window. "Every time you write a check, every time you pay for something, you get this look. Like you're keeping score. Like we owe you something." "That's not true," I protested. But even as I said it, I wondered if it was. "The truth is, Margaret, you've been using money to control us, to make yourself feel important and needed. But real love doesn't work that way." Sarah turned back to face me, her expression cold and pitiless. "Real love is unconditional. It doesn't require payment." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "I love you all unconditionally. I just wanted to help. I wanted to be part of your lives, and you are," David said quickly. "Mom, you're always part of our lives. You don't need to buy your way in," but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The question he was too polite to ask. If I stopped helping financially, would they still want me around? Sarah moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than if she'd been yelling. "You know what I think, Margaret? I think you're afraid. Afraid that if you stop paying for things, we'll realize we don't actually need you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. "Sarah, that's enough," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Sarah turned to him. "David, when was the last time you called your mother just to chat? When was the last time you invited her over without needing her to pay for something? When was the last time you spent time with her because you wanted to, not because you felt obligated?" The silence that followed was deafening. David couldn't answer because we all knew the truth. Our relationship had become transactional. I paid. They tolerated my presence. "I think," Sarah continued, "that your mother needs to learn what real family relationships look like. Relationships based on love, not money." She walked to the front door and opened it. Cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that sparkled in the porch light. "I think you should go, Margaret. And I think you should think about who you really are without your checkbook." I stared at her in shock. "You're asking me to leave? On Christmas?" "I'm asking you to learn," she said. "Learn that love isn't something you can buy." David stood up, his face pale. "Sarah, maybe we should—" "No, David. Your mother needs to understand that she can't just throw money at problems and expect them to go away. She can't buy her way into being important to us. I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his wife that she was wrong, but he just stood there, silent and uncertain. "Fine," I said, my voice barely steady, "if that's what you want." I gathered my purse and coat, my hands shaking. At the door, I turned back one last time. "I loved you both. I loved the children. I thought I was helping." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Maybe you were. But this isn't helping anymore, Margaret. This is hurting all of us." And then the door closed behind me, and I was standing alone in the snow. The walk to my car felt like a mile. Snow was falling harder now, and I could feel it soaking through my coat. My hands were so cold, I could barely grip my keys. Behind me, I could see the warm glow of the house, could hear the faint sound of Christmas music playing. I sat in my car for a long time, shivering, watching the windows. I could see shadows moving inside. My family, celebrating Christmas without me. They seemed just fine without my presence, without my gifts, without me. That's when I realized Sarah was right about one thing. I had been buying their love, and love that had to be purchased wasn't love at all. I started the car and drove home through the snow, my phone buzzing with texts that I ignored. By the time I reached my empty house, I had made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to know who I was without my checkbook, they were about to find out. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen until dawn, staring at the stack of bank statements spread across my table like evidence of a crime I'd been committing against myself for years. The numbers were staggering. In the 3 years since Harold died, I had given David and Sarah over $180,000, not in one lump sum, but in a steady stream of help that had become as routine as breathing. Car payments when David's promotion didn't come through, the down payment on their house, Emma's private school tuition, Jake's medical bills when he broke his arm, the kitchen renovation that Sarah desperately needed for her mental health. Each expense had seemed reasonable at the time. I was a widow with a good pension, a paid-off house, and substantial savings from Harold's life insurance. What else was I going to do with the money? I couldn't take it with me, as Sarah so often reminded me. But now, looking at the pattern laid out in black and white, I saw something else entirely. I saw a woman so desperate for love and connection that she'd turned herself into a human ATM. It hadn't started that way. After Harold's funeral, I'd been devastated, lost, drowning in grief. David had been wonderful at first, calling daily, inviting me for dinner, including me in family activities. But gradually, something had shifted. The calls became less frequent. The invitations came with conditions. And Sarah, sweet Sarah, who had been so supportive during Harold's illness, began to reveal a different side of herself. It started with small comments. "Margaret, you look tired. Are you sure you should be driving at night?" Or, "The children are so active today. Maybe you should rest instead of playing with them." Little seeds of doubt that made me question my place in their lives. Then came the first request for money. David had been passed over for a promotion, and they were struggling with the mortgage. It was temporary, just until he found something better. Of course I helped. What mother wouldn't? But temporary became permanent. The promotion never came, at least not with the salary increase they'd expected. And suddenly, my monthly help with their mortgage became an assumed part of their budget. Sarah had been particularly skilled at making each request seem like it was for my benefit. "Margaret, the children would love to go to Disney World, but we just can't afford it right now. I know how much you love seeing them happy." Or, "This new sofa would be perfect for when you visit. You'd be so much more comfortable." I said yes every time. How could I not? I was their grandmother, their mother. This was what family did for each other, except it wasn't mutual. I racked my brain trying to remember the last time David had offered to help me with anything. When had he last asked about my health, my loneliness, my dreams? When had Sarah shown any interest in my life beyond my ability to solve their financial problems? The answer was never. I had become a resource to be managed, not a person to be loved. My phone rang at 7 a.m., jarring me from my thoughts. David's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Mom, I'm sorry about last night. Sarah was stressed about Christmas, and I think she said some things she didn't mean. Can you call me back? The kids want to thank you for the gifts." I deleted the message without responding. 20 minutes later, Sarah called. Then David again. Then Sarah. By noon, I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails I hadn't listened to. Instead, I got dressed and drove to the bank. "Mrs. Henderson, how lovely to see you," said Patricia, the branch manager who had helped me with Harold's accounts after he passed. "How can I help you today?" "I need to make some changes to my automatic payments," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Patricia pulled up my account on her computer. "Of course. Which payments would you like to modify?" I handed her a handwritten list. "I need to cancel all of these, today." Her eyebrows rose as she read. "Margaret, this is quite a few payments. Are you sure you want to cancel all of them at once? Some of these are significant monthly obligations." "I'm sure." She looked at me carefully. "Forgive me for asking, but is everything all right? These payments to David and Sarah Henderson? They're substantial. If you're having financial difficulties, we might be able to work out a different arrangement." I almost laughed. Financial difficulties. If only she knew. "I'm fine, Patricia. These payments are no longer necessary." "Well, all right then." She began typing. "I'll need to cancel the automatic transfer of $2,200 per month to David Henderson's account. That's been going on for, my goodness, 31 months. $2,200 a month for nearly 3 years. I had been giving them more than many people made in salary, and they had treated me like I was the problem. Then there's the payment to Emma's school, $800 monthly. Jake's orthodontist, $300 monthly. The car payment to First National Auto, $485 monthly. Sarah's credit card payment, $600 monthly." Patricia paused. "Margaret, that's over $4,000 per month you've been paying on their behalf." I felt sick. $4,000 a month. For 3 years. No wonder they had been able to afford their lifestyle. No wonder Sarah felt comfortable lecturing me about the transactional nature of our relationship. "Cancel all of it," I said firmly. "And what about the automatic transfer to Jake's college fund? You've been contributing $500 monthly to that as well." Even that. Even their children's future I had been financing. "Cancel it." Patricia hesitated. "Margaret, I feel I should mention that these accounts, some of them may not have sufficient funds to cover these payments once your contributions stop. Are you sure you don't want to give them some notice?" Notice. So they could prepare. So they could argue with me, manipulate me, make me feel guilty for stopping. So they could tell me I was being selfish, that I was hurting the children, that I was destroying the family. "No notice," I said. "Cancel everything today." After I left the bank, I drove to my lawyer's office. Robert McAllister had been Harold's attorney and had helped me navigate the legal complexities after his death. He was a kind man in his 70s who had known our family for decades. "Margaret, what a pleasant surprise," he said, gesturing for me to sit down. "What can I do for you?" "I need to update my will," I said. He pulled out a legal pad. "All right. What changes did you want to make?" "I want to remove David and Sarah as beneficiaries of my life insurance policy." Robert's pen stopped moving. That's a significant change, Margaret. Your life insurance policy is worth $500,000. Are you sure you want to remove David entirely?" "I'm sure. May I ask why?" I thought about how to explain it. How do you tell someone that you've discovered your own son sees you as nothing more than a bank account? How do you describe the pain of realizing that the love you thought you were nurturing was actually just financial dependence? "I've realized that my relationship with my son has become unhealthy," I said carefully. "I've been enabling behaviors that aren't good for any of us." Robert nodded slowly. "I see. And who would you like to name as the beneficiary instead?" I had thought about this during the sleepless night. I want to establish a trust for Emma and Jake's college education, but they can only access it if they maintain a relationship with me that isn't dependent on my financial contributions. "That's unusual," Robert said. "How would we define that legally?" "I want them to visit me at least once a month, just to visit. Not for holidays or special occasions where gifts are expected. Just to spend time with me. And I want them to call me at least once a week, not because they need something, but because they want to talk to their grandmother." Robert was writing furiously. "And if they don't maintain this relationship, then the money goes to charity. Margaret, this is a very punitive approach. Are you certain this is what you want?" I thought about Emma and Jake, about how they had been learning to see me as a source of material goods rather than a grandmother who loved them. I thought about how Sarah had been teaching them that love was transactional, that relationships were about what you could get from people. "I want them to love me for who I am, not for what I can give them," I said. "If they can't do that, then maybe they don't deserve my money." By the time I got home, I had 34 missed calls. I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping deeply for the first time in months. I woke up to someone pounding on my front door. Through the peephole, I could see David standing on my porch, his face red with cold and anger. I didn't answer. "Mom, I know you're in there," he called through the door. "We need to talk. The bank called." "What did you do?" I stayed silent, watching him through the peephole. He looked frantic, desperate. This was my son, the little boy I had raised, the man I had loved and supported his entire life. And he was standing on my porch, furious with me not because I was hurt, but because I had stopped paying his bills. "Mom, please. Sarah's freaking out. The mortgage payment bounced. The school called about Emma's tuition. What's going on?" I could hear the panic in his voice. Not concern for me, not worry about our relationship, but pure financial panic. In less than 24 hours, they had discovered what I was really worth to them. "I'm not going away until you answer this door," he shouted. "The neighbors are starting to stare." Still, I remained silent. Let the neighbors stare. Let them see David Henderson, the successful businessman, begging on his mother's doorstep for money. After an hour, he left. But he was back the next morning, and the morning after that. Each time, his pleas became more desperate, more revealing. "Mom, you're destroying our family. Emma's asking why she can't go to dance class anymore. Jake doesn't understand why his orthodontist appointments got canceled. How do I explain to my children that their grandmother has decided to punish them?" Punish them. As if my refusal to bankroll their lifestyle was punishment rather than simply stopping an unsustainable pattern. On the fourth day, Sarah came with him. I watched through the window as they argued on my front steps about what to say to me. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the anger in their body language, the way Sarah gestured aggressively while David hung his head. Finally, Sarah marched up to my door and began speaking in a voice loud enough for me to hear clearly. "Margaret, this is childish. You're acting like a spoiled child who didn't get her way. Grow up. Your family needs you, and you're failing them." The irony was breathtaking. I was failing them by not paying their bills. I was being childish by expecting a relationship based on love rather than money. "I know you can hear me," Sarah continued, "and I know you think you're teaching us some kind of lesson, but the only people you're hurting are your grandchildren. Is that really what you want? To hurt innocent children because you're angry at me?" She was good, I had to admit. She knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. But I stayed silent, because for the first time in 3 years, I was beginning to understand my own worth, and it wasn't measured in dollars. 2 weeks of silence had passed since I'd cut off their financial lifeline. 2 weeks of watching from my kitchen window as David's car pulled into my driveway every morning, as Sarah paced on my front lawn talking frantically on her phone, as they left notes under my door that I collected and threw away without reading. I had become a fortress, and they were laying siege. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning, when I saw a small face pressed against my living room window. Emma, my 12-year-old granddaughter, her breath fogging the glass as she tried to peer inside. My heart nearly stopped. Using the children as messengers was a new low, even for Sarah. I opened the door, and Emma's face lit up with relief. "Grandma, I knew you were here. Mom said you might be sick, but I told her you were just hiding." Behind her, sitting in the car with the engine running, I could see Sarah watching us with calculating eyes. She had probably coached Emma on exactly what to say, how to look, how to make me feel guilty enough to capitulate. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down to Emma's level. "You should be in school." I was. Mom picked me up early for a family emergency." Emma made air quotes with her fingers, and for a moment, she looked far older than her 12 years. "She said you were mad at Daddy and me and Jake, and that's why you won't talk to us." The manipulation was breathtaking. Sarah had sent a child to do what she and David couldn't accomplish themselves. But as I looked into Emma's confused brown eyes, I realized this might actually be an opportunity. "Emma, honey, I'm not mad at you or Jake. I'm not even really mad at your daddy. I'm just disappointed." Disappointed about what? I glanced toward the car where Sarah was pretending to read something on her phone while obviously listening to every word. "Come inside for a minute. I want to show you something." Emma followed me into the kitchen, her eyes wide as she took in the stacks of papers on my table. I had been organizing my finances, calculating exactly how much I had given them over the years, preparing for the conversation I knew was coming. "Grandma, what are all these papers?" "These are receipts, Emma. Records of money I've given to your family over the past 3 years." I pulled out a chair for her. "Do you know how much money that is?" Emma shook her head, settling into the chair with the serious expression she got when she was trying to understand something important. It's $180,000. Do you know how much money that is? A lot? Emma guessed. It's more than many people make in 4 years of working full-time. It's more than your teacher makes in 3 years. It's enough to buy 3 brand new cars. Emma's eyes widened. You gave us that much money? I did. For your school, for your house, for your parents' cars, for your dance classes, for Jake's baseball equipment, for family vacations. I gave it because I love you and your family, and I wanted to help. But now you're not helping anymore, Emma said quietly. That's right. Do you know why? Emma thought for a moment. Because we didn't say thank you enough? The innocence of her guess broke my heart. No, sweetheart. You and Jake always said thank you. You're good children. But your parents, they started to expect my help instead of appreciating it. They started to think it was their right to have my money instead of my choice to give it. I don't understand. How do you explain financial manipulation to a 12-year-old? How do you tell a child that her parents have been using her grandmother as a bank account? Emma, do you remember the last time your parents invited me over just to spend time together? Not for a holiday. Not for a special occasion, just because they wanted to see me? Emma frowned, thinking hard. I can't remember. Neither can I. But I can remember lots of times when they called me because they needed money for something. Every time I came over, there was always something they needed help with. A bill to pay, a problem to solve, something expensive they wanted to buy. But that's what families do, right? They help each other? Yes, but help should go both ways. When was the last time your parents helped me with something? When was the last time they asked how I was feeling, or if I needed anything, or if I was lonely? Emma was quiet for a long moment. You are lonely, aren't you, Grandma? The question hit me like a physical blow, out of the mouths of babes. Yes, sweetheart. I am very lonely. Is that why you're not talking to us anymore? Because you're mad that we didn't help you not be lonely? I reached across the table and took her small hand in mine. I'm not talking to your parents because I realized something sad. I realized that the only time they wanted to spend time with me was when they needed something from me. That's not love, Emma. That's just using someone. But I love you, Grandma. And Jake loves you. We don't need your money. I know you do, sweetheart. And I love you both more than anything in the world. But your parents have been teaching you something very dangerous without you even knowing it. What? They've been teaching you that love comes with a price, that relationships are about what you can get from people. That's not true love, Emma. True love is free. Emma was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd said. Finally, she looked up at me with those wise brown eyes. So what happens now? Now your parents need to learn how to love me without my money, and you and Jake need to learn the same thing. But what if they can't? What if they don't want to see you if you're not giving them money? The question terrified me because I wasn't sure I knew the answer. Then I guess I'll find out who really loves me and who was just pretending. A horn honked outside. Sarah was getting impatient. I have to go, Emma said sadly. Mom's getting mad. I know, sweetheart. But Emma, I want you to remember something. No matter what your parents tell you, no matter what they say about me, I will always love you and Jake. That will never change, even if I never give your family another penny. Emma hugged me tight. I love you too, Grandma, and I don't care about the money. I just want to see you. As I watched her walk back to the car, I saw Sarah lean over to speak to her urgently. Emma shook her head at something Sarah said, and I saw a flash of anger cross Sarah's face. Even from a distance, I could see the argument brewing. They drove away, but I knew this wasn't over. Sarah would pump Emma for information, would try to twist my words, would use whatever her daughter had told her to plan her next move. I was right. That evening, my phone rang. Not David this time. Sarah. I answered on the 4th ring. How dare you, she said without preamble. How dare you put Emma in the middle of this? She's 12 years old, Margaret. She doesn't need to know about your financial obsessions. My financial obsessions? Don't play innocent with me. Emma came home crying, asking if we only loved you for your money. Do you have any idea how that made David feel? How that made me feel? How did it make you feel, Sarah? Angry, hurt, confused. We never asked you to keep track of every penny you gave us. We never asked you to turn your generosity into some kind of ledger that you could use against us later. I'm not using it against you. I'm just not continuing it. Same thing. Her voice was getting shriller. You're punishing us for accepting help you freely offered. I offered help, Sarah. What you took was control of my life. That's ridiculous. Is it? Tell me, Sarah, what would happen if I got sick tomorrow? If I needed help with something, would you be there for me? Of course we would. Really? When was the last time you asked about my health? When was the last time you invited me over just to visit? When was the last time you called me just to talk? Silence. I can't remember either, I continued, but I can remember every time you called asking for money. Every time you made me feel guilty for having savings when you had expenses. Every time you made me feel like I was being selfish for not immediately solving whatever financial problem you had. We never made you feel guilty. Sarah, you told me I was teaching the children that love was transactional, but you were the one who made our relationship transactional. You were the one who turned my love into a credit card. That's not. We didn't mean. What did you mean then? Help me understand. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and David built your entire lifestyle around my money, and now that I've stopped paying for it, you're falling apart. Another long silence. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculated. Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes, we relied on your help. Yes, we counted on your financial support. But you know what, Margaret? You loved it. You loved being needed. You loved feeling important. You loved having us depend on you because it made you feel like you mattered. The words stung because they contained a grain of truth. I had loved feeling needed. I had loved feeling important to them. You're right, I said quietly. I did love feeling needed. But I wanted to be needed for who I was, not for what I could give you. Well, now you'll find out, won't you? Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. Now you'll discover exactly how much you matter to us without your checkbook. Yes, I said. I will. Don't expect us to come crawling back to you when you get lonely. Don't expect us to pretend we need you when we don't. You made your choice, Margaret. You chose money over family. No, Sarah. I chose self-respect over being used. She hung up on me. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call, staring at the phone in my hand. Sarah had shown me her true face, and it was uglier than I had imagined. But she had also inadvertently given me something valuable. Clarity. They would not come crawling back. They would not pretend to need me. They would not choose me over their financial stability. And for the first time in 3 years, I knew exactly where I stood. 3 weeks after Sarah's brutal phone call, I was beginning to settle into a routine I hadn't experienced in years, a life that belonged entirely to me. I woke up when I wanted to. I ate what I pleased. I watched my television shows without worrying about whether someone would call asking for money. I read books that had been gathering dust on my shelves. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since before Harold got sick. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't afraid to check my bank account. I wasn't calculating how much I could afford to give away this month. I wasn't mentally preparing for the next financial crisis that would require my intervention. The silence from David and Sarah had been complete. No more cars in my driveway, no more pounding on my door, no more desperate voicemails. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist in their world. That should have hurt more than it did. But Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in my garden, planting the bulbs I'd finally had time to buy, when I heard a familiar voice. Grandma Margaret? I turned to see Jake standing at the edge of my property, his baseball glove in one hand and his bike lying on the sidewalk behind him. He looked thin, and there were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before. Jake, sweetheart, I said, pulling off my gardening gloves. What are you doing here? I rode my bike. Mom doesn't know I'm here. He glanced around nervously. She said I'm not supposed to talk to you anymore. My heart clenched. Why not? She says you're mad at us. She says you don't want to see us anymore because we didn't appreciate your help enough. I knelt down to his level. Jake, that's not true. I'm not mad at you. I love you. Then why won't you come to my baseball games anymore? Why won't you answer when I call your house? The pain in his voice was unbearable. Because your parents and I are having a disagreement about grown-up things. It has nothing to do with you. But it does, Jake said, his voice cracking. Everything's different now. Mom and Dad fight all the time. Mom cries a lot. Dad looks angry all the time. And they keep saying it's because you don't love us anymore. Oh, sweetheart. I pulled him into a hug, feeling his small body shake with suppressed sobs. I love you so much. I will always love you. But your parents are not telling you the truth about what happened. What really happened then? I looked at this 10-year-old boy, this innocent child who had been caught in the middle of an adult conflict he couldn't understand. How much truth could he handle? Your parents and I had different ideas about what family relationships should look like, I said carefully. I wanted them to spend time with me because they wanted to. not because they needed something from me. But we do want to spend time with you, Jake said earnestly. I miss you. Emma misses you. She cries in her room sometimes. I miss you both too, more than you know. Then why can't we just go back to the way things were? Because the way things were wasn't healthy for any of us. Your parents were using me, Jake. They only wanted to see me when they needed help with something. Jake was quiet for a moment, processing this. Is that why Mom took Emma and me out of St. Mary's? Because you stopped paying for it? I felt a flash of anger. They had pulled the children out of their school, disrupted their education, rather than find a way to pay for it themselves. Yes, that's why. And is that why we had to sell Dad's car? And why we might have to move to a smaller house? Each question was a knife to my heart. I'm sorry that's happening, Jake. I really am. Could you help us again? Just a little bit? I promise I'll be extra good, and I'll make sure Emma and I thank you every single day. The desperation in his voice nearly broke me. They had sent him here. Sarah and David had sent this child to beg for money, to manipulate me with his innocence and his pain. Jake, did your parents tell you to ask me that? He looked down at his feet. Mom said, she said if I asked really nicely, maybe you'd remember how much you love us. I closed my eyes, feeling rage build in my chest. Using Emma as a messenger had been bad enough, but sending Jake to beg for money was unforgivable. Jake, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You are not responsible for your parents' financial problems. You don't need to be extra good to earn my love. You don't need to thank me every day. You don't need to ask me for money. You're a child, and none of this is your fault. But if I don't ask, then we might lose our house. If you lose your house, it won't be because you didn't ask nicely enough. It will be because your parents made financial decisions based on money that wasn't theirs to count on. Jake nodded solemnly, though I wasn't sure he fully understood. I need you to do something for me, I said. I need you to go home and tell your parents that I want to talk to them. Not on the phone, not through messages. I want them to come here, to my house, and have a conversation like adults. What if they say no? Then they say no. But tell them I have something important to discuss with them, something that might change everything. Jake hugged me one more time before getting on his bike. Grandma, when this is all over, will you come to my baseball games again? I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. I watched him ride away, my heart breaking for the position his parents had put him in. But I also felt something else, determination. It was time to end this standoff, one way or another. 2 hours later, David's car pulled into my driveway. I watched from my window as he and Sarah sat in the car for several minutes, clearly arguing about something. Finally, they got out and walked to my door. I opened it before they could knock. Thank you for coming, I said, stepping aside to let them in. They looked terrible. David had lost weight, and his usual confident demeanor was replaced by something that looked like defeat. Sarah was still perfectly dressed, but there was a hardness to her face that hadn't been there before. Jake said you wanted to talk to us, David said stiffly. I do. Please, sit down. They settled onto my couch, sitting as far apart as possible while still being on the same piece of furniture. The tension between them was palpable. I want to talk about the children, I said. The children are fine, Sarah said quickly. No, they're not. Jake is 10 years old, and he came here today begging me for money because he's afraid you're going to lose your house. Emma is 12, and she's crying in her room because she thinks I don't love her anymore. They are not fine. David shifted uncomfortably. We're handling it. By sending them to manipulate me? By making them feel responsible for your financial situation? We didn't send Jake, Sarah protested. He came on his own. Did he? Or did you tell him that if he asked nicely enough, I might remember how much I love you all? Sarah's face flushed. We may have mentioned that you might be more receptive to hearing from the children. You used them. You used innocent children to try to get money from me. We're desperate. Mom, David said quietly. We're losing everything. And whose fault is that? Yours, Sarah snapped. You created this situation. You made us dependent on you, and then you cut us off without warning. I stared at her, amazed by her ability to rewrite history. I offered help when you asked for it. I never forced you to take it. You made it impossible to refuse. You made us feel guilty for not accepting your help. No, Sarah. You made me feel guilty for having money when you had problems. You were the one who said I was being selfish for not immediately solving every financial crisis you had. The room fell silent. I could see them both trying to formulate arguments, trying to find a way to make this my fault instead of theirs. I have a proposition, I said finally. Both of them looked up hopefully. I'll help you one more time. I'll give you enough money to catch up on your bills and keep your house. Relief flooded their faces. But there are conditions. The relief faded. What conditions? David asked warily. First, you both need to apologize to the children for putting them in the middle of this situation. You need to explain that their relationship with me is not dependent on money. Okay, David said quickly. Second, you need to create a budget and stick to it. No more spending beyond your means. No more counting on money from me to cover your expenses. We can do that, Sarah said. Third, you need to prove to me that you want a relationship with me that isn't based on money. You need to invite me to family events because you want me there, not because you need me to pay for them. You need to call me just to talk, not just when you need something. How long do we have to do this? Sarah asked. Forever, Sarah. This isn't a temporary arrangement. This is how families are supposed to work. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. And if we agree to all of this? David asked. Then I'll give you $15,000 to get back on your feet. $15,000? That's all? I smiled coldly. That's all you're going to get from me ever again. The silence that followed my offer was deafening. I watched David and Sarah exchange a look that spoke volumes. They were calculating, weighing their options, deciding if playing my game was worth $15,000. That's it? Sarah finally asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. $15,000? That won't even cover what we owe in back payments. It's enough to catch up on your mortgage and utilities, I replied calmly. Everything else is your responsibility. But what about Emma's school? What about Jake's orthodontist? What about the car payment? What about them, Sarah? Those are your children, your responsibilities, your bills to pay. David leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. Mom, you don't understand. We've restructured our entire lives around your help. Our budget assumes your contributions. Then you need to restructure your budget. It's not that simple, Sarah snapped. We have obligations, commitments. We can't just suddenly live like poor people. The phrase hung in the air like a slap. Live like poor people. As if financial responsibility was beneath them. As if living within their means was some kind of degradation. Poor people? I repeated slowly. Is that what you think you'd be without my money? Poor? That's not what I meant. Sarah backtracked, but her face was flushed with anger and something else. Shame, maybe. No, I think that's exactly what you meant. You think you're entitled to a lifestyle you can't afford. You think having to budget and sacrifice and live within your means is something that happens to other people. We work hard, David protested. We deserve nice things. Everyone works hard, David. But most people understand that you have to earn the nice things. You don't get to have them just because you want them. Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is ridiculous. You're our family. You're supposed to help us when we need it. I did help you. For 3 years I helped you. 3. But you turned my help into an expectation. You turned my generosity into an entitlement. Because you encouraged it. Sarah whirled around to face me. You made it seem like you wanted to help. You made it seem like you enjoyed giving us money. I did enjoy helping you. But I wanted gratitude, not greed. I wanted appreciation, not assumptions. We were grateful, David said weakly. No, you weren't. You were resentful when I didn't give enough. You were angry when I questioned your spending. You were manipulative when I hesitated to pay for something. Sarah crossed her arms, her expression cold. So what now? You give us this pathetic $15,000 and then what? We're supposed to grovel for your approval? We're supposed to pretend we need you when we don't? There it was, the truth, finally out in the open. You don't need me, I said quietly. You need my money, and you're angry that I've figured out the difference. That's not true, David started. But Sarah cut him off. Actually, it is true. And you know what, Margaret? We're tired of pretending otherwise. We're tired of having to perform gratitude for help we never asked for in the first place. You never asked for it? I stared at her in amazement. Sarah, you called me crying because you couldn't afford Emma's dance classes. You begged me to help with the down payment on this house. You manipulated me with guilt trips about how hard your life was. We were sharing our struggles with family. That's what families do. No, that's what manipulators do. They share their struggles to make other people feel obligated to solve them. Sarah's mask was completely gone now. The sweet, grateful daughter-in-law had disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. Fine. You want honesty? Here's honesty. Yes, we relied on your money. Yes, we counted on your help. But you know what? You loved it. You loved feeling important. You loved having us need you because it made you feel like you mattered. The words stung because they contained truth. I had loved feeling needed. You're right. I said quietly. I did love feeling needed. But I wanted to be needed for who I was, not for what I could give you. Well, congratulations, Margaret. Now you'll find out exactly who you are without your checkbook. Sarah moved toward the door, but David remained seated, looking torn. Sarah, wait, he said. Maybe we should consider Mom's offer. Consider it? Sarah laughed bitterly. David, she's offering us pocket change and demanding we dance like trained monkeys for her amusement. She's offering to help us keep our house. She's offering to control us. Don't you see? She wants us to prove we love her. She wants us to perform affection on demand. She wants to turn our relationship into some kind of test we have to keep passing. I looked at my son, waiting to see which way he would choose. Would he choose financial survival or his wife's pride? Mom, David said slowly, Sarah has a point. Your conditions, they're kind of humiliating. Humiliating? I repeated. It's humiliating to have a genuine relationship with me. It's humiliating to call me just to talk. It's humiliating to invite me to family events because you want me there. It's humiliating to have to prove we love you, Sarah said from the doorway. It's humiliating to have our relationship monitored and measured like we're children. Children, I said softly. That's interesting. Because children are exactly what you've been acting like. Children who throw tantrums when they don't get what they want. Children who blame everyone else for their problems. Children who think love means getting whatever they ask for. David flinched. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? David, you're 42 years old. You have 2 children of your own. And you've spent the last 3 years acting like a spoiled teenager who expects his mother to pay for his mistakes. Our financial situation isn't all mistakes, Sarah protested. We had unexpected expenses, medical bills, job changes. Everyone has unexpected expenses, Sarah. That's what emergency funds are for. That's what budgeting is for. That's what living below your means is for. Easy for you to say. You have Harold's life insurance. You have savings. You have a paid-off house. I have those things because Harold and I were responsible with money. We lived below our means. We saved for emergencies. We didn't count on other people to bail us out when things got difficult. Sarah laughed harshly. You think you're so superior, don't you? You think you're better than us because you have money and we don't. I think I'm more responsible than you because I live within my means and you don't. Your means include Harold's life insurance, Sarah shot back. Without that, you'd be just as struggling as we are. Maybe, but I wouldn't expect my children to bankrupt themselves supporting my lifestyle. David stood up suddenly, his face flushed with anger. That's enough. Both of you. This isn't helping anyone. He turned to me, his expression pleading. Mom, can't we just start over? Can't we just go back to being a family? We can, I said. But not the way we were before. Not with me as your personal bank account. So it's your way or nothing, Sarah asked. It's a healthy relationship or nothing, I corrected. Sarah looked at David, waiting for him to choose. I could see the war playing out across his face, his mother or his wife, financial ruin or family peace. Love or money. I can't do it, Mom, he said finally. I can't live under those conditions. I can't have you monitoring our relationship, judging whether we're being genuine enough for you. You're choosing her, I said quietly. I'm choosing my marriage. I'm choosing my family. I'm your family too, David. No, Sarah said from the doorway, her voice triumphant. You're not. Family doesn't manipulate each other with money. Family doesn't set tests and conditions for love. Family doesn't abandon each other when things get difficult. You're absolutely right, Sarah, I said, standing up. Family doesn't do any of those things, which is why I'm done pretending we're family. I walked to my front door and opened it wide. Get out of my house. David looked stricken. Mom, please don't do this. I'm not doing anything, David. You made your choice. You chose money over love. Manipulation over honesty. Sarah over me. Now live with it. This isn't over, Sarah said as they walked toward the door. Yes, I replied calmly. It is. After they left, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time in 3 years, I knew exactly where I stood. I knew exactly what I was worth to them, and I knew exactly what my life was going to look like going forward. It was going to be mine. 6 months later, I was sitting in my garden reading a letter that had arrived in yesterday's mail. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, unmistakably Emma's. Dear Grandma Margaret, it began. I hope you're doing well. I miss you every day. I know you and Mom and Dad had a fight about grown-up things, but I wanted you to know that I love you no matter what. I set the letter down for a moment. my eyes blurring with tears. In 6 months, this was the first contact I'd had with my grandchildren. The letter continued. We moved to a smaller apartment last month. Mom says it's temporary, but I heard her crying on the phone about money. Dad got a second job at night, which means he's always tired. They fight a lot when they think Jake and I can't hear them. My heart ached for these children, caught in the fallout of their parents' choices. But I had learned something important in these months of silence. I couldn't save them from their parents' mistakes. I saved up my allowance to buy a stamp for this letter. I didn't tell Mom and Dad I was writing to you because I think it would make them mad. But I wanted you to know that we remember you. We remember your apple pie and your stories about Princess Clara who saved herself. I smiled through my tears. She remembered the stories. Mrs. Peterson at school asked me to write about someone I admire. I wrote about you. I said you taught me that love doesn't cost money and that the most important thing is to be true to yourself. I got an A+. This child understood something her parents never had. At 12 years old, Emma had grasped the lesson that David and Sarah had refused to learn. I know you probably can't write back because Mom checks the mail, but I wanted you to know that we haven't forgotten you. And when I'm old enough to make my own decisions, I'm going to come see you. I promise. The letter was signed with a heart and love always, your granddaughter Emma. I sat in my garden for a long time after that, thinking about the past 6 months. They had been the hardest and the best of my life. The first month had been brutal. The silence from David had been complete, but I'd heard through mutual friends about their struggles. The house had gone into foreclosure. Sarah's car had been repossessed. David had taken a second job. I'd wanted to help. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to call them, to write a check, to make it all better. But I'd learned to distinguish between wanting to help and being used. And I'd held firm. By the 3rd month, I'd started to build something I'd never had before. A life that was entirely my own. I'd joined a book club at the library. I'd started volunteering at the local food bank. I'd reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the years when David and Sarah's crises had consumed my time and energy. I'd also discovered something wonderful. I didn't need to buy people's affection. The ladies in my book club liked me for my thoughts on novels, not my bank account. The families at the food bank were grateful for my time, not my money. For the first time in years, I felt valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. The 5th month had brought unexpected news. David was doing well at his second job. Apparently, he'd discovered a talent for problem-solving that his management position had never allowed him to explore. He was being considered for a promotion. I'd felt proud of him. My son was finally learning to solve his own problems, to take responsibility for his own life. Now, reading Emma's letter, I realized something else. My grandchildren were learning too. They were learning that families could survive difficult times. They were learning the value of money and the importance of working for what you want. Most importantly, they were learning to think for themselves. I got up from my garden chair and walked inside to my kitchen table, where I pulled out a piece of my good stationery. I couldn't send Emma a letter directly, but I could do something else. I wrote a letter to my lawyer with specific instructions about my will. Emma and Jake's college funds would remain intact, but with a new condition. They could access the money only if they maintained a relationship with me based on genuine affection, not financial need. That evening, I called my friend Helen and invited her over for dinner. As we sat on my back porch, watching the sunset, she asked the question everyone had been wondering. Do you regret it, Margaret? Cutting them off? I thought about it for a moment. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that David never learned these lessons when he was younger. I regret that Emma and Jake are suffering for their parents' choices. But do you regret standing up for yourself? No, I said firmly. I don't regret that at all. What if they never come back? What if you never see your grandchildren again? I pulled Emma's letter from my pocket and handed it to Helen. She read it quietly, tears forming in her eyes. Those children will find their way back to me when they're ready, I said. And when they do, they'll find a grandmother who knows her own worth. A grandmother who won't sacrifice her dignity for their love. And David? I sighed. David made his choice. He chose Sarah's manipulation over my love. He chose financial dependence over personal growth. Maybe someday he'll realize what he lost. Maybe he won't. But either way, I'll be here, living my life, not waiting for his approval. Helen raised her glass. To Margaret Henderson, who finally learned that the best gift you can give your family is showing them how to live with dignity. We clinked glasses as the sun set behind the trees. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much money I could afford to give away this month. I wasn't preparing for the next crisis that would require my intervention. I was simply living, and it was enough. In my pocket, Emma's letter crinkled softly. Someday I knew there would be a knock on my door. Someday, a young woman would stand on my porch, looking for the grandmother who had loved her enough to let her go. And when that day came, I would be here, whole and strong and free, ready to love without conditions, without fear, without price. The lesson had cost me a son and 3 years of manipulation, but it had given me something infinitely more valuable, myself, and that was a price I was finally willing to pay.